Guys, what's up? How's everybody doing? I hope you're doing great. I hope you're having a happy Monday. And I am so glad I get to talk about Criminal Minds again today. The past 2 weeks, I have not recapped an episode because week before last, I did the Sheila Keene Warren episode, the one about the killer clown from South Florida. And last week, I did part 2 of Fred and Rosemary West. I gotta say, I was kind of surprised because my first part of Fred and Rosemary West has 30 something views, and the second part has over 70 views. So go back and watch the first one. What are you doing? Speaking of viewers, 90% of my viewers are not subscribed. Why? What are you waiting for? Do it! Hit the button right now. A retired FBI agent joins the BAU to find an unsub that has resurfaced after a hiatus. Max Ryan, now a best-selling author, realizes that he had spoken to an unsub that disappeared years before and was never caught at his book signing. Max Ryan is obsessed with the Keystone Killer, the one that got away. Ryan is rude and pushy, and Morgan has a problem with him, saying, "He knows we don't work for him, right?" When Morgan wants to investigate a viable lead of a suspect, Scott Harbin, Ryan yells, "He's not the guy!" Morgan calls Garcia to find that the suspect was recently paroled. He missed an appointment with his parole officer, which gives them a reason to go to his house, where they find a woman in a box under his bed. He's not the Keystone Killer, but they were able to save the woman and arrest Harbin. When leaving Harbin's house, they found a letter addressed to Ryan on the windshield of a car. This letter eventually leads them to Walter Kern, who had been in a bad car accident and suffered nerve damage, causing him to quit killing for 18 years and change his signature and MO. When it was time to cuff him, Gideon let Ryan do the honors. Like Walter Kern, BTK also quit killing for 18 years and used intricate knots and worked for a security alarm company installing alarms and had a degree in criminal justice. So let's get into the details of BTK. When an unsub disappears, it's usually for one of 3 reasons. 1, they're in prison. 2, they're dead. Or 3, they're no longer physically able to commit the crime. John Douglas, the retired FBI agent that Jason Gideon is based on, believed that Rader had either died or been arrested due to the 14 years since his last murder. John Douglas said that 4 years prior to his arrest, his total break time was 18 years. At the time of his arrest, he was planning another murder, and he killed 10 people over 17 years. My sources for this episode are Wikipedia, Criminal Minds Wiki, Dennisraderbtkkiller.weebly.com, the YouTube channels. Big shout out to Mollie Westbrook. If I didn't mention it last time, guys, I used her video on Fred and Rosemary West for a lot of my research, and I used her again for this case, and she is amazing. Very detailed, intricate case histories, and she presents it in a very enjoyable way, and I have nothing but good things to say about this woman in England, so please go check out her channel. She's fantastic. Another YouTube channel I used was Dazed but Not Confused. And on that channel, they have posted BTK Confessions of a Serial Killer, which is a documentary about the psychologist that visited BTK in prison and her subsequent interviews with him. And it's very interesting. She has a lot of insights about him. And another YouTube channel that I watch is called Pepperoni Pizza, and that one has some clips, some segments from Dr. Phil episodes, And on that one, I watched a Dr. Phil episode where he had spoken to Dennis Rader's daughter, Carrie Rawson. She wrote a book called A Serial Killer's Daughter, and I read it. It's a very good book. I'm not going to go into the relationship with his family so much. I'm just going to touch on the reasons why he is in prison now. There are a lot of sources, there are a lot of interviews on YouTube. If you want to learn about her experience living day to day with a serial killer, I encourage you to read the book and check out the interviews. It's quite interesting. Okay, so let's get started. On January 15th, 1974, 4 members of the Otero family were murdered in Wichita, Kansas. The victims were 38-year-old Joseph Otero, his wife Julie Otero, age 33, his youngest son Joseph Otero Jr., age 9, and Josephine Otero, aged 11. The bodies were discovered by the family's 3 older children, Charlie, Danny, and Carmen, who had been at school at the time of the killings. When the kids got home, the family dog was outside and the garage door was left open, which was unusual. He found his mom's purse on the stove, turned over and emptied, and it looked like it had been searched. When Charlie didn't hear or see anyone in the house, he told his sister and brother to wait outside, and he ran to his parents' room. There he found his parents dead. They were bound with rope around their wrists and ankles, and Julie was found on the bed. Her cause of death was strangulation with a rope. Joseph was on the floor with a bag over his head, his COD asphyxiation. Charlie immediately went to a neighbor's house and dialed 911, still not knowing where his youngest brother and sister were. The police searched the house and found Joey in bed with a bag over his head and bound with a rope. Josephine was in the basement, bound and hung from a pipe. The police thought it was a burglary gone wrong, when the only thing missing was found to be Mr. Otero's watch. They wondered if Josephine had been the main target. There was semen on her leg and the floor, but no signs of SA. The semen was collected, but there was nothing to match it to. This teenage boy, I cannot imagine coming home and finding half my family dead, but he was perfect. It was wonderful because he made his brother and sister wait outside. Once he knew that there had been something hinky going on in the house, he made sure he got out and went someplace safe to call 911. And that is the best thing you can do if you ever go into a situation like that. The killer could always still be in the house and you would have no clue. So the best thing to do is as soon as you realize something is wrong, get out of that house, go to a safe place, and dial 911 from there. There were 2 types of knots used to bind the victims, a clove hitch knot and a square knot. These are not knots that are known by these are not knots. These are not knots. These are not knots that are known by the average person. So they wondered if he could be military or former military. They also looked into the Otero's background and found no enemies or motives for murder. There was 1 survivor of the BTK attacks. The sister would not be as fortunate. On April 14th, 1974, 19-year-old Kathryn Bright was out in the middle of the road trying to flag down cars for help, covered in blood. Kevin was visiting his 21-year-old sister, Kathryn Bright. When they entered the house, they were attacked by a man waiting for Kathryn to come home. The man forced Kevin to tie up his sister at gunpoint. Then the man tied Kevin up and strangled him with a rope until he thought he was dead. The man then took Kathy into the next room and strangled her. Kevin was still alive and heard his sister being attacked in the next room. He got himself untied and went to help his sister, and then the man shot him twice in the head. The man started stabbing Kathy. Kevin, still alive, ran out into the road covered with blood, flagging down cars for help. It was too late to save Kathy. By the time the cops arrived, the man was gone. They found shell casings from the gun used to shoot Kevin, a cut phone line, and a rope tied in square knots. They suspected a possible connection to the Otero's murder. This was his only victim that was stabbed. And the reason he stabbed her, he didn't like using a knife, but he stabbed her because he didn't expect Kevin to be there. Case, he had stalked Kathy, but didn't know that her brother Kevin was going to be visiting at this time. So Kevin surprised him, and because he didn't get to finish and take his time in the normal way that he does things, he just stabbed her. So Kathy Bright was the only one that was stabbed. And I believe Kevin was the only one that was shot. However, he did survive. The police wanted Kevin to talk to a crime scene artist to make a sketch, but all I could remember was a white male with a mustache wearing a stocking cap. No leads were found. The police looked at similar crimes, trying to get leads. There were two brothers that were suspected, one of them even confessed, but there was no evidence linking them to the crimes. When it was erroneously reported on the news that the murderer had been caught, the real killer called the Wichita Hangman newspaper. He told them to go to the Wichita Public Library and they would find a letter inside a mechanical engineering book. It contained details about the Otero family murders that only the killer would know. And there was no mention at all of Kathy Bright's murder. It was signed BTK. And if you don't know, BTK stands for bind them, torture them, kill them. Dennis Rader was born on March 9, 1945 in Pittsburgh, Kansas, and later moved to Wichita. He was the oldest of four brothers that didn't get a lot of attention because their parents worked long hours. He had a normal childhood with no signs of abuse. He was quiet and laid back, got average grades, and had a lot of friends. But then he started having dark fantasies. Dennis Rader's grandmother killed chickens for food, and he loved to watch it would get her roused. I don't get it. He developed a fetish for women's underwear. When he was 11 or 12 years old, he followed a teacher home from school and watched her undress. I can't believe this. This is one of the parts of this story that just blows my mind. Like, I cannot believe an 11 or 12-year-old kid would do this. He followed a teacher home and watched her undress, and he brought a rope with him and tied himself up, got aroused, and climaxed. He fantasized about tying up women and torturing them. He learned to tie knots in the Boy Scouts. One time as a child, he was watching his mother vacuuming. This is another one. What? Somehow she got her ring caught in a couch spring. I guess she was vacuuming, so maybe like she stuck her hand under the couch to like see if there was stuff underneath there and then got her ring stuck. Like, I don't know how vacuuming led to her getting her ring stuck in the couch spring. But anyways, that excited him too. After high school, he went to Kansas Wesleyan College, but dropped out before graduating and went into the Air Force for 4 years. He was discharged in 1970 and moved to Park City, Kansas, where he worked in a supermarket. In 1971, he married Paula. He was able to keep his monster side hidden, which he called Factor X. He was a loving husband, a good father, and congregational president of Christ Lutheran Church. He was able to hold off his fantasies until 1974 when he killed the Oteros. Butler County Community College of El Dorado, earned an associate degree in electronics in 1973. His first child, a son, was born in 1975, and his daughter Carrie was born in 1978. He went to Wichita State University, graduating in 1979 with a bachelor's degree in administration of justice. BTK had numerous jobs over the years. He worked for ADT Security, installing alarms from November 74 to July of 88. That is terrifying, y'all. Oh my God. He was also a dog catcher and a compliance officer in Park City in 1991. He was strict and overzealous, bullying women, and one woman actually claims that he put her dog down for no reason. 3 years after the murder of Kathryn Bright, on March 17, 1977, a panicked little boy ran to his neighbor's house and said that his mother was dead. Shirley Vian Relford was a single mother with 3 kids. Rader followed her son into the house, knocked on the door. I'm guessing the kid came home and, he followed up and then, grabbed the door, then knocked. Because why would he knock if he just followed him in the house? He said he was a private investigator, and he took out a gun. He tied up the mother and all 3 children in the bedroom. But the kids weren't having it. They were crying, which, duh. But he couldn't stand it, so he put them in a bathroom and barricaded the door. He put toys and pillows and stuff in there for him, too. He had no intention of hurting these kids, and I don't know why this one was different than the Otero's murder, where he did kill 2 kids. The kids could still see everything through a crack in the door. He put a plastic bag over her head and strangled her with a rope. After he left, the kids got out, and her oldest son went to the neighbors. The police found more square knots at the crime scene. 9 months later, on December 8th, 1977, the police got a phone call from an anonymous male voice telling them where to find the next victim. Nancy Fox was a 24-year-old retailer. The police found the back window screen cut out and a telephone line cut. Nancy was found naked on her bed, her legs tied up with a bathrobe. She had been strangled and had semen on her body. They traced the anonymous phone call to a supermarket payphone. And if you've been paying attention, we have a pattern now of semen on the body. He stated that R-ing someone was his taboo, which makes no sense. February 19th, 1978, 3 months later, a typed letter was sent to a news station. He confessed to the murders of the Oteros, Shirley Vian Relford, and Nancy Fox. He didn't feel like he was getting enough attention in the media. He said in the letter, 7 down and many more to go. And how many do I have to kill to get my name in the paper? He also suggested names for himself. Some of these names are pretty funny, though, actually. The Wichita Strangler. The Poetic Strangler. The Asphyxiator, the Garrote Phantom, the Bondage Strangler, but the one that stuck was BTK. Bind them, torture them, kill them. Dr. Kathryn Ramsled interviewed Rader in prison. She said he had arrested development and a childlike need for attention. She said he got a buzz from media attention. And she said he had narcissistic immunity, thinking he was so special that he wouldn't ever get caught. The police now were able to connect the crimes and knew they had a serial killer on their hands. They sent the letter to the Xerox lab in New York to try to trace the copy machine, and they were successful. They traced the letter to Wichita State University. Their first solid clue to them was to wonder if the killer was a student. They looked into students with suspicious backgrounds but didn't come up with anything. After 1 phone call and 2 letters, the case went cold. 9 years later, on September 16th, a husband called an attack on his wife. Her name was Vicki Wegerly, and she was 28 years old. Her youngest child was in the house at the time. A man had knocked on the door and said he was a telephone repairman, and she let him in. He then pulled out a gun, tied her up, and strangled her with stockings. Rader thought that she was dead, but she was still clinging to life. Unfortunately, they were unable to save her. The killer had used a square knot again. At first, the police suspected that her husband had killed her using BTK's MO, but he was cleared. The killer's skin was under her fingernails, and it was matched to the DNA in the other murders. The cops took hundreds of DNA swabs, but they couldn't find a match. The BTK murders went cold for 18 years. January 2004 was the 30th anniversary of the Otero's murder. The Wichita Eagle wrote an article about BTK, and Rader saw it. He made contact by writing a letter to newspapers. He included pictures of Vicki Wegerly, after death he thought, and a photocopy of her driver's license. The communication with the cops didn't stop. He wrote poetry about the murders, sent cops jewelry that he'd stolen from victims, and sent cops on scavenger hunts. He gave clues to cops to find cereal boxes. I'm guessing cereal boxes equals wordplay on serial killer. They had dolls in them posed like some of the victims. He wanted to send cops a floppy disk, so he asked the cops if they could trace it back to him if he did so. He's getting really cocky now and starting to think of the police as not only people that could catch him, not only adversaries, but almost like a sort of a friendship. Communicated with him through classified ads. So they had some sort of arrangements where BTK told them what to post and where in a classified ad in order to answer yes to the question that you can send us a floppy disk, we won't be able to trace it. So the cops said in the classifieds, Rex, it will be okay. They knew that they could trace it, but they lied to him on purpose. So when they received it, they traced it with Computer Crimes Division, and they traced the disc back to Christ Lutheran Church, made by someone named Dennis. So the police went on the church's website, found a picture of Dennis Rader, congregational president, and married father of two. Finally, they had a suspect, but still had no solid evidence. So they surveilled him 24 hours a day, trying to obtain his DNA, but they didn't want him to know about it. So they couldn't get his DNA, and they tried and followed him around, and so they got a court order. And I'm still not clear as to how they knew that his daughter had had a pap smear. Got a court order to obtain her DNA from her latest pap smear. And after 2 days of waiting for the results, the report came back that the woman who had that DNA was a biological offspring of BTK. So now they absolutely knew who BTK was. Dennis Rader. He was arrested on February 25th, 2005. They pulled him over, and when they arrested him, all he said was, "Tell my wife I won't be home for lunch." So he knew exactly why they were arresting him. He not only confessed, he also confessed to 2 more victims. On April 27, 1985, he killed Mariane Hedge, a 53-year-old mother of 4. He was on a trip with his son's Boy Scout troop and snuck away, using that as an alibi. He snuck into her home when she left, and he waited for her to come home. But she came home with a male friend that stayed for about an hour. He stayed hidden the whole entire time. And when her friend left, I guess he didn't want a repeat of the Kathryn Bright incident. So when her friend left, he strangled her, took off her clothes, and put her in the trunk of his car to the church. There, he posed her and took pictures to keep for trophies. Then he put her body back in the car and drove to a dump site along the roadway and covered her body with leaves. Then went back to the Boy Scout camping trip. That just gives me the heebie-jeebies. His last victim was Dolores Davis, 62-year-old, killed on January 19th, 1991. He dumped her body under a bridge. He had been planning and stalking another victim at the time of his arrest. He thought he had made friends with the cops, and he asked the detectives, "Why did you lie to me?" And the detective replied, "I was trying to catch you." 60-year-old Dennis Rader pleaded guilty and recited his crimes like he was reading a grocery list with no remorse or care whatsoever. His wife Paula filed for divorce, and the 60-day waiting period was waived. So she got a quickie divorce. He was sentenced to 10 consecutive life sentences and is serving his sentence at El Dorado Correctional Facility. So that's it, guys. That's BTK. And another episode down. We are over halfway through season 1 right now. And Thanksgiving will be the premiere of the reboot, and I will also be doing videos on that as well. So if you want to know about the reboot, I have a separate playlist for reboot videos. So if you're not into the true crime videos and you just want the reboot info, still subscribe and hit the bell for notifications, like, share all the good YouTubey things, and then you can watch my playlist for the reboot info. And remember, be kind to people, love your family, and I'll see you next time. Bye.